Okay, so with Pocono as well as Amazon Prime's coverage in the books, we finally have our bracket set for the in-season challenge or in-season tournament or whatever you want to call it. $1 million bracket challenge will be more ideal, but to each their own, I guess. That means we have a job to do, and by that I mean me. So right here, right now, I'm gonna give my own take on how I think the matchups will go and who I think will be the overall winner of this whole thing. Now, I put a lot of thought into this. I'm not gonna lie, this was much harder than even I thought, and the main reason for that is because of the way you have to approach these predictions. These are not like the playoffs where the cream rises to the top. Well, most of the time, we'll leave it at that. You have to think individual races here and who I think will finish better in each particular round. It also doesn't help that round 1, aka the round of 32, kicks off at a freaking super speedway. The opening round is at Atlanta. Oh, sorry. Echo Park Speedway. Yeah, no, it's still Atlanta to me. I know no one's calling it that. I can already tell a lot of brackets are gonna get busted here, mine included, because y'all already know my track record when it comes to stuff like this. I'm gonna say it right now, if your bracket survives after Atlanta, you are a trooper. Or a time traveler, because there's no way you got them all right. Okay, I'm gonna shut up now. Let's get straight into the matchup, starting with Denny Hamlin versus Ty Dillon. The 1 versus 32. Hamlin, of course, being the first seed due to his Michigan win and his runner-up at Pocono. He skipped the Mexico race as well, because as we all know, he was on paternity leave, but due to the waiver he got, that actually worked in his favor, as that missed race didn't count against his seeding, and therefore his seeding was based on his other 2 finishes, and like I said, first and second, number 1 seed. And honestly, Ty Dillon has no shot. I know I said there will be plenty of difficult matchups for me. This is not one of them. Even if the results aren't necessarily there for Hamlin on this type of track as of late, like, come on, you're going up against Ty Dillon. This is a no-brainer. Next up is Kyle Busch and Brad Keselowski. This matchup, on the other hand, is a little tricky. You think I will go with Kyle Busch because he's been in contention more often than not on these drafting tracks with RCR. But his terrible luck and my fear that he might actually be washed kind of steers me away from picking him. In saying that, however, Keselowski, he hasn't had the best luck this season either. I would argue his luck has been even worse than Kyle's, as he was outside of the top 30 in points for most of the first half of the season. So I could see this matchup going either way, as it's gonna come down to who doesn't get screwed over the most. If I had to pick, though, I'll take Keselowski. Just barely. Results are pretty similar, but Brad is more of a super speedway master than Kyle Busch has ever been, and even if you're a diehard Kyle Busch fan, you can disagree with that. Keselowski has always been the better super speedway racer than Kyle. Moving on, Alex Bowman versus Joey Logano. Logano enters as a 25th seed on this bracket. Doesn't matter. I actually have Logano win this race, just like he did last year. And just like Keselowski, he's a super speedway master, so this is another easy pick for me. Bubba Wallace versus Suarez. This is a really fun matchup, now that I think about it. And at almost any other track, I would have picked Bubba in a heartbeat. But because it's Atlanta, one of, if not the only track where Suarez excels and puts up results, I have to go with the 99. Bubba obviously is the better of the two when it comes to drafting tracks, but come on, it's Daniel Suarez at Atlanta, okay? The guy either wins or finishes in the top 5, it seems like. Next up, John Hunter Nemechek versus Josh Berry. This seems like a pretty close matchup because John Hunter has managed to pull off some sneaky good finishes as of late on these drafting tracks. He got top 10s in the last 2 Daytona 500s. He also finished 10th at this track in February. But like I said, being matched up against a Penske car on a super speedway is pretty much a death sentence. Give me Josh Berry. Chase Elliott versus Austin Dillon. Interesting matchup, honestly. Two of the more underrated super speedway racers, in my opinion. But this one's not even close. The results are on Elliott's side, and he will always find a way to finish top 15 at the very least, like he usually does. Austin Dillon, on the other hand, he's kind of had a hard time getting results at these drafting tracks. So yeah, give me Chase for this one. Ross Chastain versus Eric Jones. You know, Chastain may be a menace on super speedways, but at Atlanta, he actually puts up results. Now, Eric Jones does too, and he is actually in a similar position to his teammate John Hunter when it comes to sneaking out a good finish on drafting tracks. That being said, both legacy drivers, now that I think about it, they had the misfortune of going up against two drivers that are frankly superior in some way. John Hunter won advance because Josh Berry is driving what is essentially the fourth Penske car. And likewise, I don't think Eric Jones will advance because I feel Chastain is a much better, much more skilled super speedway driver. Even if Jones is kind of underrated himself, but you get the point. Give me Chastain on this one. Moving on to Christopher Bell versus Stenhouse. And yeah, this is one of the matchups that I had to do some serious thinking, because Bell is not exactly the best when it comes to pack racing. And just like Chastain, Stenhouse makes a lot of noise on super speedways. The difference is, however, Stenhouse, his track record is way more hit or miss than Chastain's is. So even though I feel Stenhouse will run better than Bell at Atlanta, I think he'll get caught up in some accident, or God forbid, cause one himself, which will allow Bell to take the matchup. Yeah, I think that's what's going to happen. Also, Bell won at this track in February. This was his first of 3 straight wins, and he also finished in 6th at the Fall Talladega race last year, so yeah, let's go with him. Briscoe versus Gragson. Oof. This might arguably be the toughest matchup on the bracket, which is saying a lot because Briscoe is actually the number 2 seed and Gragson is 31. But both drivers are pretty unremarkable here, results-wise. So, as crazy as it sounds, I could see this matchup going either way. But if you ask me, I'm going with Briscoe, because he's driving a better car and also his results are slightly better. Partially because he's had more time with the Gen 7, but you get the point. Ryan Preece versus William Byron. Another matchup that looks much closer than it actually is, in large part because the current points leader is the number 18 seed after a pretty below average 3-race stretch. Now, you think Byron will be a shoo-in for the next round because he's won here twice, and you might actually be correct. Although, let me be clear that I don't think this will be as lopsided of a matchup as people think, okay? RFK is pretty good at Atlanta. It's just that no one pays attention to them because Penske, but they're pretty good in their own right. And Byron is also kind of hit or miss at this track, even with the 2 wins. But yeah, I still got the 24 advancing. It won't be as easy as people think, though. It will be much closer than you think. Ryan Blaney versus Hocevar. This will be a really fun matchup because of the antics Hocevar pulled at the first Atlanta race early in the year. I believe Blaney was one of the drivers Hocevar pissed off at the end of the race, so it will be really fun to see how Hocevar manages to keep up with Blaney and the rest of the pack. But in the end, you guys know it's Blaney winning this matchup. Again, Penske on a drafting track. I don't think I need to elaborate. Next up, we got Kyle Larson versus Tyler Reddick. 2 heavyweights matching up in round 1. And it's on a super speedway. and neither driver is exactly successful at this type of track. Well, at least Reddick has that spring Talladega win from last year, and you would think that would give him the edge, but he's done little else outside of our runner-up at this year's Daytona 500. So when it comes to drafting tracks, Larson also doesn't have much to write home about, but it's worth mentioning that he finished top 5 at the last 2 Talladega races, and he also finished 3rd at this Atlanta race earlier this year. So because of that, I'll give Larson the edge, as I feel he's starting to get the hang on super speedways, and by that I mean not wrecking out as much anymore. That being said, considering how these two drivers are disaster prone in the draft, I could see this matchup going either way, which is a real shame too, as one of these guys is getting bounced in round 1, because looking at the 4 other tracks, if they weren't going up against each other until like much later in the bracket, I could see both of them making it to the finale and fighting for the $1 million prize. That being said, it's safe to say that whoever survives this round will be a serious threat for the rest of the way. In this case, I'll go with Larson, but it could go either way. McDowell versus Allmendinger should be a pretty even matchup through and through, but I'm going with McDowell simply because he's better on super speedways. Ty Gibbs versus Justin Haley. On paper, it should be the 54. But given how slow and underachieving they have been almost all season long, combined with how sneaky good Justin Haley is on drafting tracks, that's more than enough for me to sway the matchup on the 7's favor. I think Justin Haley pulls off the upset here. Zane Smith versus Cindric. Again, easy pick. Penske, drafting track. Cindric has also improved a lot on super speedways, winning at Talladega earlier this year. Yeah. And finally, to wrap up round 1, we got Chris Buescher versus Todd Gilliland. And again, this is another easy pick. Give me Buescher. Again, no disrespect to Front Row Motorsports, but they got the short end of the stick when it came to the matchups. They got some really tough matchups. They got Buescher, they got Cindric, and then Gragson got Briscoe. So, yeah. It's gonna be a miracle if one of those 3 guys, front row guys, they advance out of round 1, because I don't think they will. It's looking pretty sketchy, honestly. So, those are the 16 that I think will advance to the next round, which is the Chicago Street Course. So we go from a super speedway to a road course, or street course in this case. So only 8 will advance this time around, starting with the 2 winners from the previous round, Denny Hamlin and Keselowski. Now, neither driver is particularly stellar at turning left and right, but whereas Hamlin is just below average, Keselowski is outright terrible. I know there was a time he looked solid, especially at Watkins Glen, but like in the early 2010s, his early days with Penske, but those days are long gone now. Advantage 311. Logano versus Suarez. Again, not a pretty stellar matchup by any means when you compare results. Like Keselowski, there was a time that Logano was a legit threat on road courses, and while he's not as terrible as Brad, he's not good enough for me to pick him on this matchup. Suarez, on the other hand, is pretty good on road courses, and he's also got SVG as a teammate, who will no doubt help him out in some capacity. So yeah, Suarez takes this one for me. Josh Berry, Chase Elliott, easy matchup. While Elliott has not won on a road course with this Gen 7, he's always there in contention and always puts up results. Not much else to say. Chastain versus Bell. So far, the toughest matchup on this bracket. But even then, it's not really that close when you think about it. Bell won a COTA earlier this year, and his track record on road courses is better than Chastain's across the board. He also led the most laps at the inaugural running of the street course 2 years ago. So yeah, 20 car advancing. Briscoe versus Willie B. Another good matchup, quote unquote, but it's not really close. Now, I'll be I'll give Briscoe credit where credit is due. He's not terrible on road courses. But Byron has wins at Coda and Watkins Glen with this Gen 7 car. And he also finished in the top 10 at this race last year. So give me the 24 once again. Blaney versus Larson. Honestly, the toughest matchup simply because of the names. But like most of the matchups on this round, it's not really close. Larson clearly outclasses Blaney as a driver on road courses. And also the car he is driving outclasses Hendrick, outclasses Penske in every way on road courses. I will give Blaney a chance though and say this could go either way. This has a slight chance to go either way, as the 5 has a tendency to like self-implode. It happened to him last year, so it could happen again. But if everything goes according to plan, history shows us that Larson has the advantage. Okay, Michael McDowell versus Justin Haley. Spire versus Spire. But again, this is an easy matchup. McDowell is clearly superior on road courses compared to his teammate. And finally, Cindric versus Buescher. We close this pretty lackluster round with a nice, fairly strong matchup between two very solid road course guys. Of course, we know what Cindric is capable of at this type of track. But Chris Buescher has become a revelation at these road courses. He was always good at them. His first win came way back in 2014, talking about the Xfinity race at Mid-Ohio. But with this Gen 7 car, his talents have been on full display. Hell, this is the same guy who beat SVG at Watkins Glen last year. Yeah, I don't care how good Cindric is, he's not beating the guy who bested SVG on a road course. Not a chance. I'm taking Buescher. And speaking of road courses, round 3 will be at Sonoma. So what I said about drivers for the Chicago Street Course, it would apply for the most part, with a couple of variations. The biggest one, of course, being that we only got 8 drivers now. But anyways, Hamlin versus Suarez. It's a pretty intriguing matchup to start us off. And look, hear me out. I know Hamlin is the #1 seed and all, but I don't care. Go ahead and call me biased all you want, but I think Suarez pulls off the upset here. This was the site of his first career Cup win 3 years ago. He's pretty solid on road courses, and again, he's got SVG as a teammate. 99 is moving on to the semifinals. Then we got Chase Elliott versus Bell. Another heavyweight matchup. Two drivers that have a pretty positive track record when it comes to road courses. However, I think Elliott takes this one, even if I don't necessarily think the speed's gonna be there compared to the 20. But that's simply because Sonoma is one of his best tracks. You can count on him for a top 5, whereas with Christopher Bell, best case scenario, I can see him finishing in the top 10, but not in the top 5. So yeah, give me Elliott for this one. Then Byron versus Larson, another heavyweight matchup. This time between Hendrick teammates. Just like with Elliott and Bell, the same thought process applies here. Larson has had far more success at Sonoma than Byron. In his case, he's got 2 wins to Byron's 0. So yeah, he's my pick to advance. And we close it out with McDowell and Chris Buescher. And I hate doing this to McDowell. I really do, because Sonoma is right in his wheelhouse and he's had some pretty good finishes there. But I've said it before and I'll say it again. Buescher beat SVG on a road course last year. I cannot look at that and then go with the other guy. No, I'm taking Buescher. Okay, wow, that went by pretty quick. We're already down to the last 4. And round 4 is at Dover. And considering how Dover is Hendrick's playground and how 2 of the last 4 guys remaining are Hendrick drivers, you already know how this is gonna end. Suarez versus Elliott. Unfortunately, the Cinderella story ends here for Suarez, because there's no way in hell he is outrunning Chase Elliott at one of his best tracks. Even if Dover for Suarez, it's low-key one of his best tracks. Elliott has won here twice. So yeah, give me the 9 card for this one. And Larson versus Busher, same case applies here. Busher may be solid, but going up against Larson at Dover is kind of a death sentence, honestly. So, that would leave us with a Chase Elliott versus Kyle Larson battle for the million at the Brickyard 400. And yeah, I know it's boring, it's predictable, but this is the end result of the matchups, okay? Deal with it. I tried to be as realistic as possible. But anyways, given that Larson won this race last year, and he looked clearly superior to Elliott while doing so, it's pretty hard not to envision a similar case happening this year. Like, Elliott is solid in its own right, but for every top 5 he gives you, Larson gives you a win. He gives you stage wins. He gives you most laps led. He gives you the fastest lap. Not really much of a competition, but again, this is how I see how the matchups play out in my head, okay? This is as realistic as it goes. If everything goes according to plan, then Larson should win the million. Which, honestly, means that he most likely won't happen and he will self-implode at some point. Wait. My big brain's cooking. Guys. My brain's cooking. Wait. I just cooked. Okay, I just cooked. I just cooked something, guys. Wait. What if Larson were to lose in round 1 and Tyler Reddick advance instead? Let's see how far would Reddick go. Okay, let's see. Let's see how far would Reddick go. Okay. Okay, so instead of, if it's Larson versus Reddick, then I think he beats Blaney on the Chicago Street Course. And then at Sonoma, he would go up against William Byron. It's gonna be a little harder, simply because the 45 team has been kind of suspect this year, but it's doable. Still doable. It's a road course. Dover against Busher, it's also a winnable matchup, honestly. And then the Brickyard, where he got the pole last year and led the most laps and finished second. Yeah, I think Reddick has a legit chance to win the million if he makes it past round 1. So, in other words, the fate of this entire bracket lies in the hands of Kyle Larson and Tyler Reddick. This one matchup right here is the one that everyone should be paying attention to, because it might decide, no, it will decide the winner of this bracket, either directly or indirectly. Maybe William Byron wins it all in the end, because he didn't have to face Larson, because Larson lost to Reddick in round 1 and was eliminated. Or maybe Chris Buescher makes it to the end by virtue of not having to face Larson at Dover. Or maybe Chase Elliott finally wins something for the first time in what seems like a long time, and this ends up turning his season around and he becomes a title contender again. So many possibilities could happen. So many different scenarios could go down. But in the end, this is the one that I came up with. Okay, let me change it up a little bit, because I got Larson advancing right here. Yeah, let me move you up right here, and yeah, right here. Okay. In the end, this is the one that I came up with, and all things considered, I think it turned out pretty well.